Thank you all for joining. My name is Max Kulyk. I'm the CEO and founder of Chicory Wealth, and I'm joined today by a old friend and client and compatriot, co-conspirator. We might call it one another, co-conspirators along the way. Krista Brewer. Krista, thank you for joining. Um, Krista and I met many years ago. Um, Actually, Krista and I originally met because our kids both went to the children's school, right?
Right.
Remember? I sometimes forget that. And we were on some committee for something that involved the children's school is one of those places where you paid tuition and then they expected you to do more work
Look,
and pay yet more, right? Am I right? It
pay
was like,
more and work more.
yeah, there's, and they always had some kind of like auction thing. And I think you and I were both involved in some auction thing, and that's how we met. But and then Krista introduced me to a very interesting organization that I've been a member of now for many years called the Women's Donor Network. And then for those of you, of course, who recently read our newsletter publication where I came out as a trans man, you might say, gosh, Max, Women's Donor Network, are they still going to let you in? And so far, so good. So Women's Donor Network thinks of itself as a gender expansive organization. And we're going to test that theory in the coming years with my engagement with Women Donors Network. But today, we're talking about, and part of why I digressed into the Women's Donor Network is we're talking on the topic we're calling Beyond Capitalism. And that is a term and the name of a small subgroup that I have been involved with now for a while at the Women Donors Network, exploring how we make philanthropic decisions and also investment decisions and expand our thinking beyond the confines of the way we're used to thinking uh, as a product of being born and bred. I think all of us, I'm looking at my audience here, born and bred into the waters we swim in, which have been, you know, capitalism. Now, one could question, and this would be a longer conversation, is that what we're really doing now? Are we still really in capitalism? Have we moved to some other stage that's different? There are times when I think we should be using more of a, we tend to view our circumstances these days through a political lens, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't be viewing it more through the lens of organized crime and corruption, that we're using the wrong lens. But that's another webinar. We won't get into that today. We're just going to talk about um, things that are going on here in Atlanta and investment and philanthropic opportunities in organizations that are trying to use a different model for understanding economic activity and sociocultural activity. That's my setup. So Krista's with us today because Krista recently wrote. Well, let me back up and say Krista is an avid writer, journalist for many, many years, right, Krista? Very involved in the early days of alternative journalism here in Atlanta, still involved in that, and is the author of a monthly newsletter called The Political Peach. And if you look in our chat, I put a series of various things for you to access if you want in the chat, including Krista's newsletter. And she recently wrote a newsletter on an organization called The Guild, which is functioning here in Atlanta. And so I invited her on to join this conversation. And with that, Krista, why don't you introduce yourself as you would now that I've done all that on your behalf?
Okay. Well, that was a good setup,
Thank you.
Max. Thank you. And a little bit more about myself. I'm a native Atlantan. My parents moved here from North Carolina right before I was born, and I grew up in the immigrant community where my dad was a professor. Um, and In my early youth, I was a local news reporter for the Great Speckled Bird newspaper, which was an alternative paper here in Atlanta that actually was part of this network of underground or alternative news outlets around the country that were speaking out and reporting on anti-war, pro-civil rights, prisons and jails. And it was, a radical newspaper. And so I got that bug, and the bug never, never really died. And so here I am after all these years, not only writing a political speech, but helping support the Atlanta Community Press Collective, ACPC, which got its start really doing open records requests and investigative reporting on the Cop City buildup, and are now reporting on a variety of things here in Atlanta. Um, so to get to the topic of the day, I had been hearing about the Guild, um, and wanted to write about it and learn more about it and write about it. And yes, WDN's Beyond Capitalism organized a tour thanks to Beth Levine, who's on this call. Thank you, Beth. And so I signed up for that, and then out of that, after that tour, called the founder of the Guild, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and wrote this article. And so I'm no real expert on the Guild and on this kind of funding and uh, investment. But I can share what I learned, and it's a really pretty exciting concept. And Maggie, how do you want to do this? You want me to just launch in a little bit, or
Yeah,
you want to start
why
asking
don't you
some
go
questions?
ahead because you had a very nice succinct grasp of how these pieces fit together. And again, we're used to working in a particular kind of framework. So at least it took me a minute to grasp how these things work together as this kind of social movement, community investment, et cetera, et cetera. So hit it, Krista. Go ahead and explain what the Guild is up to, what they are, and some of the projects they're working on.
Okay, well, I'll do it in sort of a broad brush stroke, and then we can fill in the details.
Sure.
And any questions you all have, just chime
Yeah,
right on
please
in.
drop it in the chat. Yeah,
Um,
please do.
so um, the overarching thing that I think there are many interesting things about the Guild, but one is here we are in Atlanta that is so dominated by developers. Many of the developers do not live in the city nor the state, and sort of a power structure that is so geared towards this big development, big profits, and no community input. And and that's been kind of the ethos and the moral way that the city of Atlanta works. It's a very boosterism is a real important um, ethical grounding for the city of Atlanta. Um, and so, but yet we also have these strong neighborhoods here. And we have this NPU system that's really pretty unique around the country and started by really a visionary mayor, Maynard Jackson. And so into this development ethos, this an extractive profit that we have in this city, walks the Guild. And it really, I was struck by how it started in East Atlanta, East Lake co-housing.
Mhm,
The founder, Nikisha Iyengar,
mhm.
um, owned a house in this cooperative, and it's and she started doing trainings with various community organizers about how to organize and how to develop and how to just a variety of things. And then they started dipping their toe in um, a few different types of cooperative businesses. And out of all that work um, grew the guild that they incorporated, correct me, Maggie,
Max,
2023
yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
So, and
Um,
importantly, just to interrupt you just a moment, to even emphasize what you're pointing at in terms of Atlanta, one of the things you mentioned in your article, and one of the things that pointed out by the Guild is that there's a way in which Atlanta is ground zero for income inequality in a way that I at least was not aware of. We are the number one city in the country in terms of disparity of incomes. Um, we are also, in 2022, for example, a third of all homes, investors purchased a third of all homes sold in metro Atlanta. And in Atlanta's predominantly black communities, investors have purchased up to 60% of all homes. So the 2008 uh, great financial crisis, which created the perfect storm of foreclosures and evictions, etc. The gap in that, what it created an opportunity where um, institutional investors moved in and bought up an enormous amount
mhm.
of property. But of course, to you, as you've alluded, Krista, and you alluded to this in your newsletter, which I would highly recommend you guys sign up to subscribe to. It's fascinating. You will really, really like it. She puts it out once a month, I believe, right? So once a month.
Uh,
It's a once a month ish.
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 Well, no,
Okay.
I try to do it bi-weekly, every other
Oh,
week,
okay. All right.
and so, but
S-
monthly, yeah,
Ish. Okay. But um, you, the history of our city, the history of Atlanta, of course, is one of a huge racial divide
right,
and intentional defunding of certain neighborhoods. So the guild is into that breach as well. So carry
right.
on.
And I was going to say later, but I'll just throw it in now. Is that a number of our neighborhoods, surprisingly African American neighborhoods, largely Black neighborhoods, have been misinvested and disinvested
Mhm.
for decades.
Right.
And on top of that, they have been plowed over by our freeways. And the article has a link to an article about how the freeways really destroyed the connections between within many historically black neighborhoods. And we can see this, like when we go to the zoo or other neighborhoods of the streets. You'll be going down a street and it's totally blocked by the freeway, and then it picks up on the other side of the freeway.
Right.
And
Right.
so so the guild, was aware of this kind of environment, and started focusing on the zip code of 30306. And I didn't pull out, but in my article there are a lot of some statistics about it's predominantly black, it's predominantly poor, and it's located kind of in the intersection, the triangle between I I-20 West and 7585. And so there's a kind of a triangle shape of 30306, and
Is
it
it
incorporates,
30306 or is it 3
oh,
30
I'm sorry,
what
30310.
30310? Yeah. Yeah.
And it includes the neighborhoods of West End and Capitol View.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so they in 2023 started identifying looking for some properties, and um, they are in the process of developing, renovating an old building, um, 191 on Dill Street.
Hmm.
And in this building, which we toured, it's going to have on the main floor, it's going to have a small grocery store, like a corner store, a bodega that we still have in a number of cities around the country, most notably New York. And but they've been gone out of business, plowed under, torn down here
Right.
in
It's a
Atlanta.
food desert in that area right
And
now.
it
There's
is
no fresh
definitely
food
a
yet.
food desert. So they're
Mhm.
going to have the small grocery store. And in the enclosed in this grocery store, there are three commercial kitchens that they will lease out to chefs or cooks that will prepare food that you can go in the grocery store and get as takeout. Um, and then on the top, they'll have, oh, and then there's some office space and a community um, common room. And then on the top, there are going to be about 10 or so
Mhm.
um, apartments, small apartments, one bedroom and two bedroom that will be rented out at below market rate.
Mhm.
Um, so they're very near completion of this.
Mhm.
Um, then across the street, they also own a building that they're not sure. They think they might turn it into a daycare. They're not sure what it's going to turn into, but they're kind of exploring the possibilities. Across from that building, they have three vacant lots that they're exploring the options on. They only currently own two of them, but the third one is kind of promised to them. It might be a community park, it might be some additional parking, it might be there might be
And importantly, the might be's are being decided by the community. That's the
yeah.
important. So the guild itself is a worker-owned cooperative. They're developers, but they are a cooperative development company. And their whole methodology is to, as Krista's alluding to, that go into they're finding these spaces that a community itself often is pointing them towards, to essentially take off of the commercial market, take out of the extractive market, make decisions about what it should be and what it should have with a community participation, and then put it back into a community stewardship trust where members of the community can buy shares in that trust, and benefit from whatever, likely not excessive, but small profits might be thrown off from the commercial uses of these buildings. Um, right? I got that right?
Yes, exactly. And the if you are an investor in this, you can get um, some of the, potentially small profits coming back, and you also get some input into how the development is managed and future developments.
Mhm.
And so they have a structure called the Community Stewardship Trust
Right.
that they've
Right.
set up that will own these properties and that investors can invest in and have a say so in how they're managed.
Mhm.
And so the minimum is $25 a month or $120 a year, I think.
Mhm.
But it could be a lot more, it could a little more or a lot more
Mhm.
that an individual can put into this investment. And do you want to talk a little bit about ground cover also?
Yeah. Yeah. So just to get the concept here, you've got this worker-owned cooperative, or this guild, which is the actual developing cooperative. Um, I think when they created this vision, they realized they were going to need, in essence, capital to be able to respond relatively quickly if a property came up, up for sale, or they wanted to be able to purchase it. And so they developed a nonprofit, really, that they got grants to support, called the Ground Cover Fund. So the Ground Cover Fund is a pool of capital. I think it's I don't know if their target was 30 million or if they have 30 million. I'm a little unclear on that, but I know that they have accumulated capital that sits in the nonprofit that allows them to respond relatively quickly if an opportunity arises. Now, we're talking about right now this community stewardship trust. That's what Krista was describing, these various multi mixed use types of buildings that they're renovating and putting back into the trust. They already have a traditional community land trust where they have done renovations on you know purely below market living properties, and those are already in a community land trust. But the community stewardship trust is a slightly it's a somewhat new concept. um, what intrigues me about it, I mean, there's a lot of things that intrigue me about it, but I'll talk about that in a minute. To go back to ground cover, so let's just imagine some of their funders have been, kind of the usual suspects. I've got a list here: larger grantors, um, big foundations, etc., that have supported this. But those of you who are of a philanthropic bent, this is also something worth looking into for your own philanthropy. Ground cover as a possible 501c3 place you might contribute. So currently they've gotten money from the Loeb Fellowship, the Annie Casey Foundation. Those of you who listen to NPR recognize that name. Common Futures, Brookings, the Candida Fund, the Aspen Institute, MetLife Foundation. So they've gotten some big funders to put some money in this kind of war chest that will allow them to, begin to buy yet more property that would eventually wind up in this community stewardship trust. So, and the governance model is very interesting. As Krista alluded to, if you are a shareholder, you have a opportunity to be part of the governance. They have two classes of shares. They have shares for folks who make less than, I believe it's $90,000 a year, and shares for people who make more than $90,000 a year. And the difference in the classes is the liquidity. So for people who are making less than $90,000 a year, and may end up having some sort of emergency, they allow quicker liquidity on their shares if they need the money than people who are making more money. So it's a way of trying to like help people who would otherwise be completely locked out of any kind of investment of this kind or any participation of this kind to participate in a way that's less risky for them, because folks obviously who have a lot less money often run into a lot more liquidity problems if something happens. I mean, the average American in this country can't rub $500 together in the event of an emergency, according to all the studies that have been done. So naturally, some folks, even if they've been saving money into something like this, may need quicker access to it. Yeah, what else to say? Go ahead, Krista.
Well, thanks for filling us in about ground cover. And Elizabeth has a question that she put in the chat. So
Oh,
while
yeah.
we're on this, why don't we?
Can you see? Why am I
Yeah,
not seeing it? I'm having trouble seeing.
is what's the difference in ground cover as a C3 and a traditional land trust? Is the land trust also a C3?
Yeah, great question. I think ground cover is a specific C3 that is you give money, that the idea behind it is that money will be deployed in the purchase of properties. And I believe, if I'm understanding it correctly, ground cover can buy properties that could go into a community land trust eventually, or go into the community stewardship trust. The distinction being the community stewardship trust are going to have properties that have some sort of mixed use and thus have the opportunity to throw off profits,
Mm-hmm.
basically, that can get
Mm-hmm.
recycled back. Where the community land trust, if I'm understanding the format, feel free to correct me, Krista, the idea is basically you've got this land that is now off of the speculative market and is strictly being rented. And so it's not necessarily throwing profits. Anything that's happening there is just going back into the maintenance of those properties. Is that
Right.
your understanding too,
That's
Krista?
that. Yes, that's my understanding, and
Okay.
that in the traditional land trust is exclusively, in their view, or in their use, is exclusively for residential
Right,
rentals for people that were being displaced in some way or couldn't anyway. So, and it's below market rents.
right, right.
Um, and going back to the stewardship trust, we didn't mention the MRF,
Oh yeah,
the
let's talk about the Murph. That's an interesting space too.
right, which I always thought the name was the MRF because it was near Murphy Avenue, but I I
But
realized
no,
it stands for multi-use radical people's hall, and it's a big space. Um, I think it is actually on Murphy Avenue, or it's very close to Murphy Avenue.
yeah,
Um, and it was used a lot, different very small nonprofits that have office space there. It's been used for it was used for organizing work during the Cop City referendum work. They were making posters and painting this and that, and deploying canvassers. Um, and it's undergoing renovation right now. There's some um, orgs that are still functioning there, but it's going to go into this community stewardship land trust when they finish the renovation. So it'll have the same investment opportunity for lower income people or for higher income people, and it'll have the same governance structure
right. It'll be part of the Community
once the
Stewardship Trust.
renovation is finished.
Beth Levine and I, Beth, I'm going to talk to you. Beth is also involved in WDN, and last spring they had an event over there, and so Beth and I got invited to go check this place out because we're both part of this Beyond Capitalism group. So we go over there, and this was they haven't finished the renovations on it, but it's a very functioning building. We kind of wander our way, and this is not a neighborhood that I'm traverse, and I'm betting most of you do not either traverse that part of the city. It's only 10 minutes away, but it feels like a world away, right? So we go in, we're trying to find the door, we walk in, and there is a party going on. And I'm telling you, it was one of the best parties I went to in all of 2025 at this place in this neighborhood. And They were just celebrating the opening of the space. And so what they're doing now with the space is they're building out in the back, which used to be just more or less an open hall, is they're putting in what they're referring to as maker spaces, people who actually make various things, textiles or other sorts of things, will be able to rent those spaces. They're putting in a commercial kitchen, and it's really a place that the community can gather. I think people can rent it to do various things. I think I heard somebody talk about having a baby shower there. There's always an ongoing space for childcare. Um, it was one of the most warm and welcoming spaces I have ever been in. And believe me, in the middle of 2025, I was really looking for a place like that. And I was reminded communities of color in particular, of which of course this is embedded in a community of color, have amazing historically deep roots in resilience. They have a lot to teach those of us who have never had to face the sorts of systemic issues that we're now facing. And I found it a very moving experience to be in the company of the people there and in this space and to see what they were doing with it. And so, to Krista's point, there's going to be yet more renovation done by the Guild, and then this will also be part of this community stewardship trust. Um, so, uh, why? I guess I want to move to it for a minute. Like, why does this matter to me or you or anybody? Why are we talking about this? Um, or why was I moved to say, let's have a webinar that's just about this thing, right? And I think that part of it, speaking for myself, and Krista, you can speak to it, why you were so moved to write about it, um, is that, I say to clients, or I've said to clients for years, um, you cannot invest in the public markets and do no harm. You can only do less harm. So there is in me, and I think in a lot of us, trying to think about, are there places we can put our money, both in terms of our charitable dollars, but even our non-charitable dollars, where we're not just not doing harm, where we can actually legitimately look ourselves in the mirror and think, well, we might actually legitimately be doing some good for real. That it's not just like net, probably a little less destructive to the planet, but actually net, really making a difference in the communities where we live. So that's certainly part of it for me as to why to bring this to you, just to let you know that this kind of thing exists. Um, the other thing is the model that they're working with is a model that is replicable and is already being replicated in other cities, but is also replicable not just in distressed neighborhoods, but could be replicable in all neighborhoods. How many of us live in neighborhoods where we wonder what the next move is going to be, particularly if we live in metro areas? And what's going to come in next to us? What data center are they going to put up? Whatever the case may be. And how do we begin to? I mean, one of the examples of this is how a community that has been historically overlooked and marginalized is trying to organize itself, empower itself to take back some level of control about its space, its living space. And I would submit to you that some of us live in neighborhoods where we feel like we have a lot of control, and it's an open question as to how much control we really have. And so this is a kind of model of community organizing that for me is intriguing. That you could use this in lots of different spaces and in lots of different neighborhoods if you were so moved to actually collaborate and get to know your neighbors and actually be part of a decision-making process where the space you live in you have some input. When we were preparing for this webinar, Krista joined me, and Liv, who's at a conference today, so not with us. We were talking about Atlanta, and to me, I've always described Atlanta as the land where developers were allowed to run free. And that has not always led to an ideal situation, right? I mean, historically, for those of you, and some of you on the call are not living in Atlanta, but I would submit to you that this kind of situation goes on in a lot of large metro areas. I don't know, Krista, what intrigued you? Why this?
Well, that it is an alternative, and thank you for that, um, sharing that perspective. That it is an alternative, really, to this extractive capitalism, and it's a different way of operating, and it's also a different way to use our money, um, to rather than just buying stock, and um, that it's contributing on a really very granular level
Mm-hmm.
to improving um, the lives and the environment, the community environment, in a particular area, and it is scalable and replicable. And I ask Nikisha Nikishka,
Mm-hmm.
um, how scalable this is, and she said apparently she's gotten a lot of pushback about this is just a little thing, and she said it really takes a long arc to
Mm-hmm.
change the sort of the milieu of development and kind of the mindset, and they can't really make a huge change, oh, kind of quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it does present a different path. And there's a link in my Peach article to this website called the Solidarity Economy. It's a national organization of all these groups that come together that are working in various ways on alternative economies. And the Guild is an active part of that. And so it does show us how things could be done differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I flipped. Did I sort of their um, sort of their mission and vision statement, I guess. Um, and I could sort of summarize some of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That that land and land ownership has long been a tool to destroy, disenfranchise, and extract from indigenous and Black communities. The Guild's work in community ownership emerges as a direct response to this racist and capitalist notion of ownership. And they talk about structural racism within property ownership. And it produces these inequalities. The racial wealth gap that you mentioned, Max, the higher rate of poverty among people of color, environmental racism, for example, data centers currently is a current threat, and gaps in access to credit and capital and economic mobility. Another statistic that goes along with our racial wealth gap is Atlanta is the most difficult city to for a child that's born into poverty in Atlanta is least likely to move out of that poverty of any other city in the country. And and on another way to look at this is that urban renewal. I meant to mention urban renewal earlier because I kind of got my start as working for a city planning department, and that made their money off of urban renewal here in Atlanta. And the lower income, mostly Black communities have been devastated by this concept of urban renewal that our government was implementing, and the undervaluing of Black homes and Black assets. So the Guild is showing a different path, as I've said,
Yeah.
and
And it's not, I want to say, my experience of it is it's not an easy path. Okay. I mean,
no,
renovating some of these buildings, like one of the things they talked about in the property that's across from 918 Dill, that they acquired, had originally been acquired by some investors who then sought to unload it once they realized that there were, buried gas tanks that were going to require enormous amount of, rehabilitation to make the land possible to build on. So, these neighbors, some of these neighborhoods have been so destroyed, and there are lots and lots of codes and conflicting departments when you're trying to build, that a lot of private developers, it's not, the margins aren't going to be there for them, so they just walk from this. So I mean, it takes patient capital, it takes a mission driven commitment, it takes a community organized to rehabilitate itself to get this done. It's not like, after the first, I think it was after the first Trump administration, we got what they called opportunity zones, right? You may have heard about these opportunity zones. And they were special tax breaks for, neighborhoods that had, or areas of certain cities that had been really devastated or weren't well developed, and they gave special tax breaks to, real estate developers to come in and develop them. Well, what they were doing was it was just like gentrification on steroids. I mean, it was sold as we're going to help these neighborhoods, but they weren't going to help the people in the neighborhoods. It was going to be a mechanism by which the people that had ever lived in those neighborhoods were going to be driven from the neighborhood and whatever else was going to emerge there. And so, yeah, I mean, this kind of you have to turn you have to make this kind of thing work. You need capital, and you need to be committed to a non-extractive philosophy, and you have to have enormous amounts of resilience to get through all of the red tape to cause this to happen. This is not It's a much longer term, people first, community first driven view. It is not about turning a fast buck. And developers in Atlanta and all over the country, that's not the way they think, right? That's not so it's very, in that regard, that a solidarity economy puts people and community first. And people and community first means there's process, there's cost, there's governance decisions that have to be made. I mean, it's a for me and from my perspective, it's a much richer you get a much better outcome for all the people involved. Um, but it isn't a band-aid. It's not a fast solution. It's a long-term commitment and a long-term solution. And you have to have people who are mission aligned to want to do that. And I do think
Mhm.
that the Guild is an example of that. And it's, to my knowledge, it's the only example of that particular thing in Atlanta. I'm not aware of any other type of thing like it in Atlanta. Are you, Krista?
We have some land trust housing over in
Yes.
Bedford Pine, east, I guess you would call near the Beltline, and that's really an example of how the the Beltline has really transformed that area and gentrified it really dramatically and made it very difficult for lower income
Mhm.
um, families to stay there. But there what has been this long-term effort along Boulevard and adjacent streets to put home to in, encourage, I guess, home ownership on these land trust properties. The land is owned by
Mhm. The trust
the
itself.
trust,
Hmm.
and then the house goes there, and so that it's a more affordable because they don't have to pay for the land, is the way I understand that worked,
Right.
and that's been going on for a while.
Right.
But other than that, I don't think we have any other examples of it. But what we do have is examples of rampant gentrification.
Yes.
We have a
Yes.
lot of
Yes.
that.
Yes. I do.
And
We're very good at that.
and I
Yes.
think the Guild is trying to put a finger in the dam, kind of, so to speak, down in that
Right.
in the Capitol View West End neighborhood, and the Beltline is going in fairly near there also, and there is a kind of a push already of gentrification there.
Right. Right. There are fewer and fewer people of color inside the metro area than there once
Mhm.
were. Heard that. Yeah. Um, just to say a little bit about some other things that we're doing at Chicory to invest in ways that have a more direct positive impact and aren't just a less bad alternative besides direct investments. Um, we've been searching for a long time for a way to scale. And when I say scale, what I mean is um, be able to put certain types of investments in everybody's account if they have a certain allocation, right? As opposed to just this one or just this one or a one-off kind of thing. We like to be able to scale things so we can manage our assets in a unified way on behalf of clients. And we've been looking for ways to get more exposure to community development financial institutions, which are essentially banking alternatives where they're lenders to typically more marginalized communities or people who've been overlooked or entities have been overlooked for capital, um, and credit unions, etc. And we have now found a group to partner with where we can begin to do that at scale. So some of you may notice in your portfolio, and this would be as a bond replacement or a bond substitute, maybe not an entire replacement, but a substitute for certain nominal treasury types of investments. We're now trying to invest more in these community development financial institutions, which are pound for pound in terms of the same duration, as good or better in terms of yield than traditional treasuries. And arguably, it depends on how you want to handicap what's happening here in the United States. Less risk, depends on how you look at it. But certainly, for those of you who have been thinking, gosh, it'd be nice to not just be funding this federal government, wouldn't it be interesting to get some yield off of something else? We are doing that. Do feel free to ask your individual advisor about that, and they will be happy to talk to you about some of what we're up to. Also, for certain folks who have larger amounts of capital in the after-tax space, we've been partnering with a guy, a firm called Clearing Call Capital, who specializes in municipal bonds targeted at infrastructure in historically marginalized and systemically disenfranchised communities. So again, that are well rated, do not have more risk. It just happens that that particular bond is targeted for that kind of work. Sometimes it's about water pipe replacement or lead pipe replacement or that sort of stuff. It's not very sexy, but the yields have gotten a lot better on municipal bonds, and depending on your tax bracket, the tax adjusted yield can be very, very good. And so we're partnering. The man's name is Eric Glass, and he runs Clearing Call Capital. So that's something we're doing as well. And we just continue to search for ways to, pound for pound as fiduciaries, we always are having to weigh risk, and we're always having to weigh return, and we're always having to weigh illiquidity and all the sort of things that you pay us to look out for you, about in relationship to this. We're trying to find ways to, do all of the things we have to do from a fiduciary standard and still find ways to actually have a positive impact, not just a less negative impact. And in a world where there's been such dramatic collaboration in such a negative way by some of our largest corporations with this administration, speaking personally, I'm highly motivated to do all we can do to find those ways to bring those opportunities to you where it's appropriate for you within the particularities of your plan or your situation. Regarding the Guild, in any individual participation, if those of you who are interested, I already talked about the ground cover fund as a possibility for a charitable dollar or a donor advised fund contribution that exists. If you are a resident of Atlanta or considered an ally, you can also make a small investment in the Community Stewardship Trust. You do not have to be a resident of 30310. I am not in a position to suggest to you what those returns will be. I would expect that they would be nominal, and I would expect them to be very low, frankly. And it could take a long, long time for you to see a dollar back from that investment. So do not take this is not broad fiduciary advice for if my compliance officer is listening. This is not that. It is a way of participating in something very interesting. And I would go into it if you are interested at all, assuming you will never see that money again. So it's almost like a charitable gift, except it might turn out not to be, but who knows? But that is possible. You can go to the Guild's website and you can read all about it. You do not have to be an accredited investor to participate. And there's clear instructions if you so choose to do something like that. So just be aware that exists. And we'll continue to try and bring you more and better information about all of these things that emerge and educate you as we ourselves are educated on how to get our minds to think beyond just the pure profit motive. I think we do that pretty well at Chicory, but there's always room for expansiveness when it comes to this. I'm going to make a couple of general announcements. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. First is a reminder that we have a mid-year client event taking place for those of you who are either in the Atlanta area or decide you want to take a little road trip and come on into the Atlanta area. We'd love to see you. That's happening May 21st at the Avalon Theater in Avondale. And it's an old line theater. We're excited to be in that space. It'll be a new space for us. We're going to be I'm going to be leading a conversation with the executive director from the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights. This year's 1% for Social Justice theme are organizations across the country that are supporting immigrant communities in their defense of their rights, and they're trying to protect themselves from the rampage of our ICE agents. So we've supported 8 different organizations in cities across the country where we have advisors. So we'll be hope to have some small events in some of those other cities, but the larger event will take place in the fall. Our fall event will be we'll have an opportunity for you to give to them, but in May we're going to have a conversation and then just hang out and have some fun. So please RSVP by May 4th. chicorywealth.com/events, or send somebody an email and we'll get you RSVP'd. Do feel free to bring your friends if you've got friends who you think want to come hang out and have a little party atmosphere with us and are otherwise supportive of this kind of mission. Please do bring them. We're happy to have anybody you want to bring come along. I think I'm looking to see. Oh, one other announcement. There will be no webinar in May, in part because we're having this client event, and in part because our team goes on its annual retreat. We'll be on retreat, the 18th through the morning of the 21st before the client event. So I just want to say thank you very much, Krista. And again, are you guys being able to see the link? Somebody let me know if you can see the links I put in the chat. Are you seeing links I put in the chat? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, check out those links. Sign up for Krista's newsletter. It's really great. She's an amazing writer and an amazing human, and we're glad you've been around Atlanta all these years, because God only knows how much worse it would have been had you guys not been able to do your work. We appreciate you. And just want to thank you all for hanging in there and coming to this conversation. We really appreciate it.